Data Science Sessions Class 3, and I'm introducing you to Python here on Python Tutor. Welcome to this new class. We shall be looking at different data types we have in Python, including strings, integers, and floats. I'll be looking at booleans, I'll be looking at string concatenation, operations, functions, and data structures. And all this will help us in our future understanding of data science through Python libraries. Thank you. Let's get started. Before we think of pushing on to import libraries like NumPy, like scikit into data science using Python, we need to know the basics of Python, especially the syntax. When you know the syntax, then you can work on complicated stuff to do with data science. So let's begin with some of the basics of Python. And the first thing that I want to discuss about today are variables. We can have a string variable as simple as Barack equals to a string called Barack Obama, which is, so this means that Barack is becoming a variable storing the name Barack Obama. Now these variables can be in all lowercase, all uppercase, first letter can be uppercase and lowercase, but a variable cannot have a space between it. It cannot be Barack Daniel equals, it's just one thing. So if you have two different words and you want to mix them together, then you can make one the first letters caps and then the remaining letters lowercase, or you can make them all lowercase. You can make an underscore between two words. As long as it's merged into one, then it becomes a unified variable, and that's as simple as that. So when you tell Python to print my name is, and you call our variable Barack, which is already defined, it will print my name is Barack Obama, which is a string variable. Other than the string variable, we also have numerical variables that can also be engaged in so many operations in Python. Python is a logical language. Let's look at this integer variable representing age. We've defined age as 60. 60 is an integer. It means it has no decimal places. It's just truncated as a 60 whole number. That's why it's an integer, int, in Python. Whereas we also have a new variable, which is height, that is representing a float, 185.42. It's a float because it has decimal places in it, and it's representing height in centimeters or whatever. So if you want to display the values of the numerical variables above, then we can just say print, and then we say I am, in quotations, then we call age, and then years old, and height is, we call the height centimeters tall. So when you print this, or when you run this in your console, you should be able to print that I am 60 years old and 185.42 centimeters tall. It will just call the age and the height. But also you can make operations on this code by maybe calling something like adding age and height, and maybe you can say the total. If you were to define something like a total of my age and height, is you add up a float plus a string and then I beg your pardon, a float plus an integer, and then you get the resulting result. So that is all about operations of addition, subtractions, multiplications, or whatever, as we shall see in subsequent presentations. But also in Python, we also have something else that is called concatenation. Concatenation means you get two different strings, or you can get two different strings and then you just concatenate them together. Take a look at this that is called message. Message has been given a string that is, I was the 44th president of the United States. And we also have a new variable called full message, and you can see we've used an underscore, as I told you earlier, to just merge two words into one variable, because there can't be a space between two words as a variable in Python. And we defined this as Barack, which we already know represents a string name Barack Obama. Then we add a plus, and this time a plus is not an operation to do with the addition, subtraction, but it's concatenating it with quotation marks while we are calling something, and we are adding onto it a variable that we've just defined as message. So we are concatenating strings. And if you ask the console to print full message, it will call the variable Barack that is from earlier here, and Barack is Barack Obama. So it will add on to it a message that I was the 44th president of the United States as the message. So when you print full message in full, it's as concatenated and variable that we already had, Barack Obama, plus a new variable message, which is also a string, and then we've heard what we call string concatenation. Moving on forward, we also have Boolean variables and comparisons in Python. Take an example of our variable is president, and is president represents a Boolean true, and this is a Boolean variable indicating if you were a president. So if you want to display this Boolean variable, then we can say that print is in a string form, comma, a variable Barack, comma, a string a president, then comma, we'll call our new variable is president. When you run this, it should be able to print that is Barack Obama a president? Is Barack Obama a president? And then is president it's a Boolean, it's either true or a false, so it will bring true. Away from variables, some other things that you need to look at in Python are lists and indexing. Let's take an example of this new variable achievements. And achievements represents a list, and in this list we have 1, 2, 3 items. The first item is Nobel Peace Prize. It's a string. And the second item is Affordable Care Act. It's also a string. And the third item is Paris Agreement, a string too. So if we bring in a new variable that is called first achievement, and we ask first achievement to bring achievements as a list, but index out the first item, which is indexed by 0. This way we are able to access the first item in the list above. So if you want to display that, you can print one of my notable achievements is under quotations to make it a string, and then we call our variable first achievements. It should be able to print that one of my notable achievements is the Nobel Peace Prize, meaning that the first item, Nobel Peace Prize, represents index 0, Affordable Care Act represents index 1, and Paris Agreement represents index 2. This is so great and so good when you are learning more about manipulating lists, tuples, and data structures in general, which we shall see in subsequent presentations. The third other thing that you need to look at in Python deeply are functions. In Python, we define functions using a keyword called def. This is followed by variable of your function, and for this case it's great, it's our function, and then in the brackets we add a parameter to it, and for this case a parameter is name. So a function that greets the person is what we're trying to bring out. And this is a dummy function because it asks us to print hello and then return the parameter name. So for any function that we have in Python, you need to call it to put it into action. So we've called the function greet, and the parameter needs to be replaced by a new one. And for this case, it's Barack. Remember, Barack is already being defined as a variable, a string variable that represents a name, Barack Obama. So if you call it again into this function, then this should be like hello Barack Obama. That should be what this function does. But there are more quite complex functions, as we shall see in the far future, that do quite more complex things, where you can have one function that gets into another, or we can have loops into within a function, and many other things. But this is just the structure of how a function would look like in Python. As I conclude, I need to mention about some reserved words that we use in Python, and we often call them keywords. We cannot use reversed words as variables or function names. So some of these words that we cannot use that are already reserved by Python itself include true, false, none, and, or, if, else, while, for, def, return, import, pi. I mean, you can use pi if you've not imported pi, but these are keywords. Is one of them. Not is also one of them. So these have been reserved by Python because they have a deeper meaning with Python. And if you're writing them in any text editor that has Python installed, you should be able to see Python highlighting them as different from the rest of the other code. And this is just generally the flaw of Python, one of the easiest programming languages that takes less lines of code, and it's highly scalable, and that's why we're going to be using it highly in data science.